second movie screening of our career. It's called In Memory of Fish, the award-winning documentary of restoring native salmon to the Columbia River system, bypassing all the dams. So we'll see you in a month.
Yes.
After that, you'll see us collecting garbage with our local fire department. We're doing a watershed cleanup on May 6th. All events are in our website. I would also like to thank the ambassadors for the popcorn and the councillors of Peachland who attended. Thank you. I'm now going to introduce our panelists. Sadly, Genevieve Daniel couldn't make it. She is, oh, I asked. Oh, come on out.
There must be the other Genevieve Daniel that was listening. Okay, I don't like that. Mike, where are you? Please have a seat. So we have Corey Derrickson, who we already met, giving our land welcome. Corey. You don't know this, but Corey is a PhD candidate at the University of Gonzaga, a doctorate of leadership program advancing Indigenous culture and knowledge and continuing the work of her great-great-grandmother. Peachland is fortunate to have a First Nations forestry outfit in our community forest. It shares a very small part of our community watershed. We have many other licensees, but we have Dave Gill. He's the forestry manager for Intitiks Resources, West Bank First Nations forestry operations. And Dave has spoken with us many times before, so we can have Dave Gill. And this lady, Genevieve Daniel, the prime mover and organizer behind Old Growth Okanagan. We have Old Growth here in the Okanagan, but she has helped set up people in Fairy Creek. She has land defenders and blockaders in her group, and she, like the rest of us in the room, are passionate about protecting what we love. So, Genevieve Daniel. And me. So, any questions? Comments? Wow. Critique?
Depressing.
Corey, would you like to say something?
Is this on? Can you hear me? Oh, there. Okay, there I go. Okay, yeah, let's get this conversation going. And yes, it's depressing. Yes, it's sad. Are you all going to write letters now?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, you know, giving you back that responsibility that from our anthem that you live here. This is your territory just as much as it's mine. This is your home. From our philosophy, teachings, and perspective from the Indigenous Seal is that you know, what happens up there in our forests out there in our forest happens to us eventually. If everything is killed off, or you know, things have not. I don't want to insult you, Dave. I feel like I'm on tiptoes. I'm not going to point out anybody or anything. So please don't be offended if I say anything that might be offensive. But what happens up there, you know, eventually it happens to all of us. So, and it happens when we say all our relations, we mean everything. When we say to me, which Dave is learning, and Tumhulauk is our land. Tumik is all living things on the land. Lives, breathes, has a heartbeat. You know, you've seen in the film everything underneath. I'm getting shivers again because every time I speak the truth, I feel these shivers because I know the ancestors are with me. I've had the privilege with following after my mother, Delphine Derrickson Armstrong. Some of you may have known her or met her. I come from an amazing family of knowledge keepers, and she had interviewed and spoken with and been around so as a language speaker, so many elders in our nation and community. And one of the great elders, she has an honorary doctorate. We say to me, so gone to the spirit world, Dr. Mary Thomas. She's Okanagan Shuswap from the Enderby area. She spoke about exactly what was on the film, what happens when you cut down a tree, the knowledge and everything that grows underneath, the medicines, all of the things that are beneath the trees that don't get kind of calculated or weren't normally calculated in the practice of cutting down trees and clear cutting, and that knowledge that exists of the plants and the connectivity, the families that was talked about, the tree families, the roots plant families, and the plant families, and so that was her concern, and that was, when she did that short film, that was probably 40 years ago. So she was talking about that then, and now we're on such a critical point, within the Okanagan, within our homelands here, that we see so many changes. It's really hard for us to continue our ways of being when we go up to the mountain, when we just go out, out on the land, just in the valley, to practice our ways of being. That's collecting our roots, that's collecting our berries, that's hunting, that's fishing. The water has changed so much, so everything that's happening within our territory is happening to us, and it's affecting our way of being. Our children, trying to bring our children and our grandchildren now out to teach them, how to be land protectors, how to practice our ways of being, even our traditional foods, our medicines. Those things are all becoming, extinct or in a critical way of depletion, where it's hard to even, we can't live the way we used to live, and it's affecting us, and it is really sad, and we have to think of new ways to make those changes to preserve those ways and those important systems that exist and have existed, because when we do our prayers, when we say all relations and honoring, it's the sacred circle. If it's unhealthy up there, we become unhealthy. That's all I want to say for now. I'm just going to pass it on. Any questions maybe on that? Or pass it to Dave?
I have an answer to what she said, is from Dave Gill. How are we going to live in a land that's unhealthy? Well, we'll give it to First Nations to repair. We damage it. We've been given a community forest on our watershed, and it's a different kind of forestry they're practicing. So I'd like to ask Dave Gill to speak to that.
Thanks, Taryn, and thanks, Corey. First of all, I'm not an expert. I think the more I learn about the forest, and the more I learn about traditional, when I say traditional, I mean indigenous ways of doing things, the less I actually know. So I've been a forester for 35 some odd years. I graduated in the same class as Suzanne Simard, actually. We're the same age. But she has more gray hair than I do. When I came to Westbank, I've been with Westbank First Nation now for about 10 years. My previous employment right out of university was in Northern Vancouver Island and Haida Gwaii. And admittedly, I was one of those guys hanging ribbons on old growth trees. I did that for the first 7 or 8 years of my career after I graduated from forestry. That's what all of us did. That's what we thought was the normal thing to do. We didn't have any guilt about it. It was what we were told to do, and that's what we did. When I came to Westbank in 2013, my whole forestry perspective was flipped over on its head. It changed. And I'm still learning, and I'll learn for the rest of my career. Thanks to people, well, Corey and a lot of other people at Westbank and throughout the Okanagan Nation, I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned a lot about what the forest really means to the people that I'm working for. And that's a lot different than the companies that I've worked for in the past. We're fortunate enough, I'm fortunate enough to be working for Westbank First Nation and to be actually a manager of their community forest. And I report to a board of directors where profit is not the most important thing at all. Like Taryn said, the primary objective of our company is caring for the land, not necessarily making the money. We've got 4 strategic goals, and one is ecosystems, one is people, one is community, and the other one is business. So the business aspect provides us with the funds to care for the forest, and that's how we reinvest back into the land. We were quite excited a couple of years ago when the province said we're going to double the amount of tenure that First Nations hold in the province. We haven't seen any of that yet. None of that's come to fruition at this point in time. And I made a presentation to Chief and Council just on Monday, and the Chief is going to be sending some letters out again. This is the 3rd round of letters that have gone to different ministers, and I have a feeling that this time, if there's no answer, there'll be some other action taken. I don't know. I'll stop there.
Cliffhanger.
Hi, I'm Genevieve. I just wanted to clarify that I'm not the head of Old Growth. Old Growth, although I am the face that just continues to put out articles on social media, but in fact it was certainly a collective of people that at the right time all kind of came together out of impatience, I guess, and out of disgust. It was during a time in which there was some photographs that were taken. I'm not sure if you have seen this, but it was a massive tree that had been cut, and it fit one logging truck that was being pulled out of Fairy Creek. And I think it was just shock that most of us felt when we saw that. And so I just kind of followed step in my son's interest. He was involved with probably the first banner that was placed across Kelowna's parkway there, and I think he was interviewed by the media, and he cared about what he was seeing, and I cared about what I was seeing. I was born and raised in Kelowna. I have family in Quebec, so every summer we would fly across country and we'd take off from Kelowna and go to Vancouver. And every summer I looked down from that airplane and I saw more chunks of land that was clear. And when I was younger, I didn't think too much of it because it was normalized. It was, BC's way of making money. It was glorified as an industry that was great. And it wasn't until I went traveling after I graduated, and I spent a couple of years in some other countries, and I returned, that I was shocked, and that was 20 years ago, of the amount of clear cutting that took place. I'm an ex-tree planter. I, planted trees in the summer to make enough money to go to university. And so I've seen the industry firsthand. I've seen the amount of waste that is left on the land. And I've seen the greed, the drive, in all aspects of, capitalistic interests, corporation interests. And I think 2 years ago, after reading the strategic review in 2019 that came out with these 14 recommendations about, how to make things sustainable, how to address these this huge disconnect of industry, government, and people not really being aware of what is going on. And like the video, the documentary said, you know, unless you actually are there witnessing whether things are actually happening, there is really no way to know whether there is an accountability there of what is being said by our governments, what the promises are, you know, made. You know, for example, what you were talking about deferrals and you know, recognizing traditional lands, stewarding and providing options in moving forward so that we can protect our land, but also, you know, enhance sort of this need to turn this industry around and for us to be able to live cohesively together. So just sort of looking back at, you know, this need for reflection right now and this need for people to start to witness what's happening around them and to discern whether you agree with what you're seeing, and whether people are actually following through on what their promises are about preservation and respect. And I think the whole conversation that has been taking place with Indigenous communities, I think there's definitely a need for us to recognize as a collective that we need to reframe things completely. And to recognize that there is actually more value in our environment than what we can sell it for. And I think we need to look at investing into stewardships that are led by our Indigenous groups.
You had a question, you were about to ask Dave a
I was just
question.
wondering about the forest that has been given to the West Bank First Nations. I'm just wondering if it's a second growth forest or first growth?
It's a combination of both.
Okay.
So we have the West Bank Forest tenures, and one thing I should mention is that there's power in tenure right now. If you have tenure, especially an area-based tenure, you have the power to manage that land. And WFN has two tenures, and they're both area-based tenures. And so we, WFN, has the exclusive rights on those tenures to harvest trees or to harvest non-forest type products too. So in 2006, WFN got the community forest, and at that point in time, about, I would say 25 to 30% of it was second growth, and the rest was, I don't like to use the word old growth, because there are so many definitions of what old growth is. So what we've used is the term old forests. Old growth can be crummels, like 6 feet tall and 200 years old, or it can be a big tree. And so our old forest can be a ponderosa pine, Douglas fir forest down here in the valley bottom that's 350 years old. Or it could be a spruce balsam stand up near Big White that's 150 years old. But we live in a fire origin or fire dominated type of ecosystem where we don't get that same type of old growth that you see on Vancouver Island or the West Coast. It's a different type of old forest. So what we've got what we call our 7-generation plan, which is on our website right now, and we've identified through a zoning process. I hate to use the word zoning; it just doesn't sound right. But a process where we've identified about 60% of the area within WFN's tenures to be cared for old forest values. And then harvesting would be permitted in the other 40%, but it's not the clear-cut kind of harvest that you saw here. It's different, and I'd be happy to show anyone what the kind of work that we're doing right now, what that looks like on the ground. Sorry I get too long-winded here.
Thank you. There was a question at the back.
Any other questions?
I got a question. It's mainly for Corey. I'm just curious, me and my friend Cruz, we go for a hike up it's in the city limits of West Kelowna, up the road there, up into Turnbull. And it's some of our favorite forests, we just love it. There's 2 beautiful peaks and everything. And we noticed last summer that there was logging tape on it, so we're just getting curious. Actually taking that logging tape off, I'm nervous. And then, and the forest is still there right now, and so like we've just been kind of drumming up ideas, like is it regional park, or is it, what is the step, or like what do you feel like is the best step forward for like making that maybe a safe space? And yeah, I guess I'm just really curious about like, is it a park that is a good move, you know, is it, or is it like looking into more like 10-year stuff, or yeah, that's my question. But it was, yeah.
I'll try to answer that, yeah. So are you referring to the area that was burned in the fire there? Okay. So yeah, we did some salvage logging up there this summer. So we did some, it was, I guess, a silviculture system where we tried to leave the trees that were still green, but salvage the ones that had burned, but then leave the biggest ones and not touch the biggest ones. The problems that we had when we tried doing that was some of the trees that were green were really dead because the roots were burned out. And when we went in there, we tried to leave everything that was green, but in some cases, some of those green trees, as soon as you came close to them, would fall over because their roots were gone. But the intent that we did there, and if you go up there now, you'll see a lot of the big black trees still standing, just the skeletons from the fire, and as many of the green trees standing as we could. There's no further plans for anything up there, so I'm not sure what kind of flagging. There's people hanging flagging all over the place for like bike trails and all sorts of other things, but there's nothing else planned up there right now. We did some fire mitigation work in there as well, just before the fire came through, which is, we're kind of lucky we did it, where we went out past the community 200 to 300 meters south of Turnbull, and we thinned that out, and we took out the ladder fuels, and when that Mount Law fire came up over the ridge and hit that, it did slow the fire down. It dropped from being a crown